Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short. Glad to have you along for the discussion today. Today we're going to talk about the topic of Rachel Held Evans and the comments that I've received in respect to criticizing her. And I'm finding out that this is a common theme among the internet, Twitter, YouTube comment crowd, the internet in general crowd, that Rachel Held Evans, although she died at a young age of 37, that she has a lot of fans, and these fans take offense that anyone would ever come in and step in and criticize her, and especially since she's died now, and especially for myself, because having read the Old Testament many, many times and read it every year. In fact, I read the one-year Bible every year, and I cover the Old Testament in my readings, my daily readings. And I'm constantly struck by people that God takes their life. We can think of, for example, Uzzah, the unfortunate fellow who was moving the Ark of the Covenant on a cart, and it started to tip. That is, the Ark of the Covenant started to tip over, and he grabbed the side of the Ark, and he was struck dead by the Lord because he touched that holy thing. That's one example. There are numerous examples in the Old Testament where it says that God took the life of the king because of blasphemy. It could be disobedience. We see just numerous places in the Old Testament where God takes someone's life. And we see this in the New Testament also. We see the example of one of the Herods who exalted himself above what God felt was appropriate for human beings, and God struck him dead. His bowels gushed out, and he died a painful, ugly death. And in light of that, because of the ministry, if you want to call it that, of Rachel Held Evans, here's a so-called evangelical, supposed evangelical, and yet she's written books and done videos that mock the Bible and basically blaspheme God and ridicule and make fun of Christians who are trying to be faithful to the words of Scripture and who are not following along in her liberalism, her progressive Christianity. And so she mocks them and mocks the Bible and makes fun of. She wrote a book entitled A Year of Biblical Womanhood. So you would think, well, what's wrong with that? That sounds like a good title. Well, it's a mocking lampoon of biblical womanhood. It's not a sincere, good faith book on how Christian women should live. It's a making fun of Christian women who are trying to live the Bible. That's her idea of fun and humor. And so if you've seen enough of her writings and you've seen some of the mocking videos that she's put out, she's trying to be funny, but she's trying to be funny about things that are not to be taken lightly. And when you start mocking God's people and mocking the Bible, you're doing the devil's work. And it is my opinion that it's very possible that the Lord God might have taken her life because of some of the things that might have offended his honor and character. And so he took her life in a mysterious way. Okay, so my speculation of how she died and how God might have taken her life, because we know he does that. Again, Old Testament, many examples. New Testament, examples. You can think of Ananias and Sapphira. Supposedly were giving all the money of their land to the church, but then, in fact, they actually lied and they kept back part of it and still claimed that they gave all the money from the land sale. And Peter confronted Ananias and Sapphira, and the Lord struck them both dead. Okay? So this happens. This is a reality. And so when you're dealing with people who are either blaspheming the Lord, who are mocking holy things, who are poking fun at things that they shouldn't be poking fun of, and doing the devil's work himself, then it makes sense that God might take their life. That's what my opinion is. Okay, now, you would have thought that I had committed the unpardonable sin because there are so many different comments of people say, oh, that's terrible what you said. Oh, that's terrible. She is, and just up in arms. I want to read an article that illustrates this whole phenomenon better than I could just by explaining, and that is how a Christian leader, John Stonestreet, wrote a very respectful, very sympathetic, and yet offered a little hint of criticism about Rachel Held Evans, and the Twitter world just exploded, and he took down his article because he didn't want to offend people who were offended by that. And I want to interact with this description of this. And what I'm going to do is bring up an article by Rod Dreher in the American Conservative magazine that he puts out. And I want to read a little bit of this and just show you how, as evangelicals, we need to be strong and to put our convictions in print and state our convictions. And then once we are stating our convictions, to not back down, to not apologize for saying true things. We have a tendency in evangelicalism to retract or back off or apologize for saying things that we really don't need to be apologizing for. And we come across as weak and wimpy and not really someone to deal with because of this trend. And unfortunately, John Stonestreet falls into this, but I want to read the description by Rod Dreher, who actually thinks John Stonestreet did a good thing. But I disagree with Rod on this, but let me explain. Let me get into this article, and we'll read it here together. And it says, a reader asked in the comments last night if I intended to comment on the death of Rachel Held Evans, the iconic progressive evangelical, or rather ex-evangelical. I recall that she ceased to identify with the label. Progressive evangelical is just another name for a liberal person who is on the way out leaving evangelicalism. And this woman, Rachel Held Evans, who died tragically at age 37, died kind of mysteriously too. I said, no, that I don't know enough about her writings to write intelligently about her legacy. She and I had clashed publicly about theology, but all of that is rightly set aside in the face of illness and death. When I heard that she was in the hospital, I tweeted out a request for all of my followers to pray for her and her family. And that's good. We should pray for those who are sick, no matter who they are. Similarly, when I was overseas last week and I heard that she had died, I tweeted out an expression of sorrow and condolence, and once again invited prayers for her and for those who love her. I didn't feel it necessary to say any more. And that's where a lot of us just said, okay, we're not going to say anything immediately that would be good or bad. Just let what happened happen. On my long trip back to the U.S. yesterday, I noticed that my friend John Stonestreet, and he is also the one who does the Breakpoint broadcast podcasts in place of Chuck Colson, who died a few years ago, a leading conservative evangelical who had written a beautiful response to her death, published in Christianity Today. So John Stonestreet publishes what is described here, a beautiful response to her death, published in Christianity Today. Earlier in his life, John had known and worked with Rachel and her husband, Dan Evans. Their public ministries took divergent turns as Rachel moved to the theological and cultural left. So again, that's the context. She's moving away from Bible-believing Christianity. She's moving away from the historic Christian faith. She's moving into the old liberalism that rose its ugly head in the early 20th century. She was heading in that direction. And John's appreciation of her life observed that. In fact, he had appeared in one of her books as Greg the Apologist. In the end, his piece was a true appreciative, written with obvious respect and affection. The Atlantic's Emma Green, in explaining the effect of Rachel Evans had on the U.S. religious landscape in her 15 years of writing, said, Evans, or even as Evans rejected certain traditional notions of Christianity. That's a nice way of saying she basically jettisoned some of the key beliefs of Christianity, often throwing herself into the middle of intense fights over race, gender, sexuality, and politics. Oh, by the way, sexuality, she affirms the homosexual lifestyle and she affirms gay marriage. That probably tells you all you need to know about her. She is not Bible-believing Christian. She retained the respect of her adversaries. In the days following her death, conservative Christian figures from Southern Baptist leader Russell Moore to the blogger and provocateur Matt Walsh have expressed their shock and shared their condolences for her family. Beth Moore, one of the most popular female Bible teachers in the country, wrote on Twitter that she was thinking about what it was about that could cause many of other sides of the issues to take their hats off to her in her death. People are rife with grief for her babies, yes, but also I think that part of it is that in the area of gross hypocrisy, she was alarmingly honest. Yes, she was honest in her denial of the historic Christian faith, but I would say not just honest, though. It was a little bit sardonic, sort of, I would say, in her criticism and her doubt. She was honest about her doubt, but in her criticism, she crossed the line. Would be my point. Her friends and allies shared this great grief more. Over the weekend, many people posted personal stories about Evans' kindness online, and they were shared thousands of times. So I was genuinely shocked to see John excoriated by progressives on social media for daring to speak words of criticism about Rachel Held Evans, even in the context of an affectionate remembrance. So then Twitter and Facebook and YouTube comments and so forth, these people who like Rachel Evans started to gang up and try to cancel anyone who would utter even a hint of criticism of her. And so there's a lot of that going on, a Yellowstone geyser of it, in fact. So that's the Twitter mob. John Stonestreet eventually took his essay down after word reached him that at least one member of Rachel Held Evans' family had been hurt by what he wrote. Can you believe that? So here is a man who went out of his way to be nice and kind, but in honesty had to mention the fact that she was departing from evangelical Bible-believing Christianity in significant ways, that her life trajectory was away from Bible-believing Christianity and into some form of secular liberalism, sometimes called progressivism, that essentially denies the core of the Christian faith in order to sort of be friendly with the world, the secular scientific world, and to be up to date, you might say modern, in the sense that you could walk into a university faculty lounge and get along great with all of these secular people. And by doing so, you have to deny certain things about Christianity. And so the liberals are perfectly willing to do that. Some liberals actually have gone so far as to deny the resurrection of Christ and say Jesus rose in the hearts of those disciples rather than actually physically, bodily rose from the dead. So that's the kind of trajectory of liberalism. And so John Stonestreet gave an overwhelmingly gracious write-up about Rachel Held Evans, but he did say something to the effect that she was kind of going liberal. And, then the Twitter mob descended on him. And here's what he did. He eventually took his essay down. That is capitulation. And I really feel sad for evangelicals today because there's a lot of that going around. If someone is offended by what you have said that is true even, You will sacrifice that truth. You will retract that truth for the sake of that person's feeling so that you don't offend them. This is not the approach we need to take. John Stonestreet's essay was good on its own. He said good things about Rachel Held Evans. He did not tear into her. He did not cut her down or criticize her in a way that he could have. He was very gracious in even his criticism of her. But he didn't give it all flowers and all roses. And so they were trying to cancel him, and he backed down. This is not a good policy. Now, according to Rod Dreher here, who is a conservative Eastern Orthodox Christian, he says, John Stonestreet taking his article down, it tells you something about John Stonestreet's character that he did this. I don't believe so. I think it shows that he's willing to back down and he's willing to cave in to be nice. And that's not what we need in our moment right now in Christianity. We don't need people who are always apologizing for everything they're saying and always taking things down and always backtracking and always trying to do damage control when they didn't do anything wrong. It's the same way with the culture when they come at Christians for criticizing the LGBTQ movement. If we criticize sexual deviant perversion, that is not anything we have to apologize for. And to take down an essay of gracious words about someone when nothing in there that was wrong and nothing that was false, and it was just taken down because it offended somebody, I think people are taking Christianity and exploiting a part of Christianity where we do want to love people, we do want to care for people, we do want to be sensitive to people, but we can't allow them to jerk us around on a leash and tell us what to do, because we need to stand up in this time, because we need to stand for Christ. So John Stonestreet, he wrote what he wrote, and I think that he needed to stand strong on that. And now look at Mark Galli, who is the editor of Christianity Today, a once great magazine. Mark Galli also, let it be said that he was, let's see, he is no longer the editor of Christianity Today, but he apologized for having published the essay. So you got John Stonestreet wrote a gracious essay about the death of Rachel Held Evans. Somebody was offended at something in it, and so they took it down. Here's what Galli said. Evans was admired by many for good reasons. When I finished Stonestreet's piece, I came away thinking he deeply respected and admired Evans despite their serious differences. That's an understatement. But as I reread the piece later, I realized there were problems I should have caught. Now I see that what was intended to be a tribute came across overly negative and not framed with well. Stonestreet's piece was well-intentioned, but one of the jobs of an editor is to help authors see how their piece will be read by a larger audience. I failed to do that, and as a result, we inadvertently antagonized many who deeply loved Evans. No, they antagonized the Twitter mob who's coming after anybody who doesn't conform to them. So we apologize for publishing a piece that created anger and exacerbated grief over Evans' untimely death. Okay, so they caved in and gave in to the Twitter mob. Okay, but as someone who did read the essay, I think one thing that gave it such power was that it was clear Stonestreet, who is a leading conservative evangelical and someone Rachel Held Evans once thanked for being her teacher, did in fact deeply respect her despite their serious differences. I finished the essay thinking that I hope one day when I die that I've conducted myself in such a way that progressive Christians who think I'm seriously wrong about the serious issues will write a remembrance like that about me. The issues that divide me from progressives or liberals, Christians and otherwise, are non-trivial. They are important, in other words, neither to me nor to them. I would never expect them to pretend that my writings and advocacy was worthy of admiration when they agreed with it, but in wake of my death, not something worthy of comment. Frankly, I would find it much more respectful if they clearly noted that we disagreed on important issues. If, for example, Andrew Sullivan were to predecease me, the essays I would write about his life and legacy would be about what I regret as the good and the bad of his public life, but would focus more on the good because that's honestly how I see them. If I tried to make him into a saint, I could see him rolling his eyes because I love him as a friend and sometimes as a frenemy. I would tell the truth about him as best I could. My greatest hope would be that if he wrote me a postmortem remembrance of me, he would do the same. A hagiographical postmortem take on me from a Christian writer with Andrew Sullivan's convictions would be fundamentally dishonest, and I solemnly swear that if he does such a thing, Sully is not capable of it. But if he were to do that, then I would haunt him until he retracts it. Okay, so Roger is basically saying, hey, be honest. If you're going to write about someone who died, just be honest and say, hey, we didn't agree. There were major problems. And seriously, though, I do not understand this intolerance we have developed for critical analysis of the dead. Love her or not, Rachel Held Evans stood for controversial things in the public square. She made a difference. She was not milquetoast, which is why so many people had strong views of her. To write nastily about her after her tragic passing would be a cruel and graceless act. But it is an act of generosity for her theological opponents to recognize her errors as they see them within a statement of appreciation. If her life had not mattered and mattered greatly, nobody would care. So that's the same thing that I say as far as my opinion, that it's very possible that God might have taken her life. Now, I don't believe that means that she doesn't go to heaven or that she missed out on eternal life. I'm not saying that at all. I have no idea. I have no idea what the state of her soul is, and nobody can know for sure except her and the Lord. But I do say that it is very possible that the Lord took her life because of her mocking of the Bible, which is a big deal. Now, if someone doesn't like what I'm saying, they can say, well, no, that's not true. She didn't mock the Bible. And I would simply ask them, read her books, watch her videos, and then ask yourself, is she approaching the Bible with respect and reverence that revelation from God deserves, or is she treating the Bible as basically a human book that is inspiring in some places, and we can draw from some places, but in other places that we should reject? If she's asking us to reject the Bible in some places, then she is teaching against Christianity and she is teaching against the Bible. And that's a serious thing. And it wouldn't surprise me at all that in her joking and laughing and mocking and making fun of the Bible, that it didn't offend God. It would make total sense that it was offensive to God. It's offensive to many Christians. And we kind of get a feel, we kind of can sense, it's almost like what did the Supreme Court justice, one of the justices said, that they can't really give you a definition of pornography, but they know it when they see it. And it's the same way with blasphemy. It's kind of like, look at her writings, look at her videos, look at her interviews, and how she talks about the Bible and how she laughs at Christians trying to follow the Bible. And that sure looks a lot like blasphemy. That sure looks like mocking the Bible and those who are trying to follow it. So if that's true, then what she did was very serious. Okay, seriously, though, I do not understand this intolerance. That's what Roger wrote. I am not writing about Rachel Held Evans here. She was not a part of my world. I had some unpleasant social media clashes with her over the years, but they were relatively minor. She released a tweet storm condemning my book, The Benedict Option, on spurious grounds, which I responded to. In my response, I admitted that I don't know much about her thinking, but from what I've read about her over the years, she strikes me as an anti-fundamentalist reactionary. That's true. In the interview that Rachel Held Evans cites at the start of her tweet thread, I say, Trump is in fact no answer to the crisis. He's a symptom of the crisis we're in. But you know what? So is Rachel Held Evans. In fact, from what I can tell of her thinking and her influence, I think she may be more acute symptom of cultural breakdown within Christian church than Trump. Why? Because with her church of what's happening now style progressivism, she represents the hollowing out of Christianity by moralistic therapeutic deism. I wonder if there's a single major point on which her theological and moral views clash with the opinions held by secular progressives. No, there isn't. She totally lines up with the radical, leftist, Democrat, secular, socialist-leaning people who care nothing about Christianity, care nothing about the Bible, and she agrees with them on moral points. So we're clear. If you believe that it's morally wrong for people to respond to the death of Rachel Held Evans by tearing into her legacy viciously, then I agree with you. There may be a time for doing that, and I believe there was, and I believe that I waited. But for 4 or 5 days after she is dead is not the time. It's a matter of respect. But if you believe that there is no morally acceptable way to write critically about her legacy so soon after her passing, well, we've got a problem. That's right. We've got to be able to tell the truth and stay with the truth and not back down. And that's what's so discouraging with people like John Stonestreet and Christianity Today. When they write a respectful essay about Rachel Evans' death and her life and don't put flowers in every sentence, then they get criticized, and then they back down and they remove their essay. That is not what we have to do as Christians. That's not what we're called to do. Jesus did not do that. You know, there were times when Jesus spoke and someone came up to Jesus and said, the Pharisees are offended by you. So what did he do? Did he retract his statements? Oh, I wouldn't want to hurt the Pharisees. No. You let the truth stand. And so I would just say to people, if you don't agree with my opinion about Rachel Held Evans, then you prove me wrong. And if you can't prove me wrong, let my opinion stand. And certainly don't try to cancel me. Well, I hope that's been a helpful commentary, and we'll see you back next week on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.